Hello, welcome to Nina and Pinta Live. I'm Stan Bertolo and I am delighted to welcome Joanne Lloyd, founder and partner at Nina and Pinta Consulting. Joe, COVID-19 has changed our industry in a way no one thought possible.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? We have no benchmark for what's happening and what is to
Nope.
happen. Yet companies must put in place a travel program. How does one
Yep.
start in a COVID world?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, look, I think the thing to start with here is that there's no precedent really for this. So nobody's really an expert. We can just take our knowledge of what's happening in the market, what's happening in our business, and draw a strategy from there, really. So on that note, I would suggest that as a travel manager or travel buyer or procurement, wherever you sit in the business, you start to look internally and see what's happening in the business. So when are you likely to return back to travel? That's usually connected with when you're likely to return back to office as well, but also understand what might have changed within your business. So a lot of people have seen new travel policies emerging where perhaps they're not doing any internal office meetings and they're just doing business critical. Well, that can have a huge impact on the particular routes that you might be traveling. Also, we're seeing, particularly in the UK and in the European regions, we're seeing a bit of a multimodal shift where people who would have been flying between destinations are now looking at hiring a car or taking the train. That's a big one because it allows them more social distancing than they feel they can get on an aircraft. The other thing that we're noticing is that typically business trips that are happening are taking longer, and they're taking longer because there's more planning involved. So, there's usually some additional approval processes that need to take place. And so people are planning further in advance, and then they're making sure the trip is worthwhile and they're staying longer. So, my advice would be to anybody to engage with the stakeholders within your own business and talk to them to get some idea as to what they think is going to happen in their department as they return to business. So, are they budgeting travel for next year? When are they looking at travel for next year? Is the travel likely to start around mid next year, etc.? Because once you have that understanding, then you can start to plan accordingly. So the other aspect of this is to look to market. And looking to market, I've really kind of broken this down into two areas. One is around the hotels, and then we can talk a little bit about air, because whilst both markets are pretty volatile at the moment, there are different pressures on both of them. So I think, if we start with the hotels, my first piece of advice would be to benchmark, to look at the market and see what's happening. And depending on the type of program that you have in place, if you have a program that has a lot of very fixed rates versus a lot of dynamic rates, you might want to revisit that. Some of the hotels, in fact, all of the hotels are really struggling. I think globally, the capacity at the moment sits at around 30%. And, we hear stories of five-star hotels in some big European cities that are selling as low as €50 a night. So if you've negotiated a program in a pre-COVID world, those rates that were offering really good savings and discounts may no longer be doing that. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second that you aim to leverage that market, because that's not really the principle of what we're trying to do here. But what you might want to do is to take a look at how you're sourcing. So what we're advising customers to do is to really take a look at transitioning your program to as much of a dynamic one as you possibly can. So that allows your program to ride the wave of the discounts and to ride the market without having to focus on specific fixed rates all the time. Now, there may be some cities, and there are some cities where the rates are holding, and so your discounts might still be good if they're your majority cities. So in those instances, I would suggest that maybe look at having a dual rate. So you have your fixed rate with your dynamic rate sitting underneath it. The beauty of a dynamic rate sitting underneath a fixed rate is, of course, you don't have any blackout dates. So that is something worth considering, and it allows you to take advantage of both ends of the market and to make sure that you are really working within the confines of it. The other thing that I would suggest for hotel programs is to regularly take a look at those cities, which are your big cities, and perhaps put in place a target rate for your travelers that they should be aiming to pay within that city, but definitely a capped rate. So you can say, okay, if you're looking to stay in London, you should aim to pay about this much, but definitely don't pay more than that. And that gives your travelers, those who are traveling, something to work with. Now, the air side is a little different, and where we see the average nightly rates in hotels dropping quite considerably, by contrast, we see the air average ticket price going up. So this is quite interesting, because if we look at the capacity and the volatility in the airline market, IATA just refreshed its projections for 2021 in terms of air capacity, and they're now projecting that 2021 is going to be 46% down against 2019 numbers. Their previous projection for that was 29% down. So this starts to put a whole different color around how you approach your air program. The latest figures from OAG, which I think were published on the 19th of October, have said that they're anticipating, well, what they're seeing on the 19th of October is that currently 70% of routes versus the same period of last year are operational. Only 53% of the flights and 51% of the seat capacity are operating. So that has a big impact in terms of what the market is, of where the market is. And with the costs rising and travel managers having to deal with a lot of unused tickets and deciding how they're going to run those, this is going to have an impact in the airspace for at least a couple of years. So the first thing around the air contracts would be to take a look at why you're renegotiating. So if you are in the middle of a contract, leave it there, don't touch it. Different airlines have got different strategies around this. There are some airlines that are just extending the deals. There are others that are extending at a quarter at a time. But there are not many that are going to be pushing you for a renegotiation at the moment. So bearing in mind what you find out from your internal stakeholders, my advice with your airline contracts would be to look at them very tactically and decide how you're going to approach them. So there may be specific routes that are changing. You might find that your top routes are no longer your top routes. You might find that actually there's a certain portion of travel that's going to come back before the others, and that's what you really want to look at. And just be really open and really honest with your airline partners. This is a collaboration, and if you hear what all of the airlines are saying at the moment, everybody is encouraging a really open and honest dialogue. Everyone's in the same boat. They know that you're not going to be able to project specific numbers. They know that you're not going to be hitting certain targets within the contracts. And as I say, that applies to every corporate customer and every corporate contract that they're working with. So be as open and honest as you can be. Share as much knowledge as you have, and take it from there, really. But it is possible to negotiate air contracts in this environment. You just need to be very specific about what it is that you're looking for. And I certainly wouldn't necessarily encourage to do a full air RFP, but rather take it in a much more dynamic way, the same way that I'm suggesting you do with your hotel program. And keep that discussion on a regular basis. As travel is returning, then continue to talk to your airlines on a regular monthly basis. So I know that was a lot of information, but just to round it up, look internally to your own stakeholders and figure out as much as you can what's likely to happen to the business, what's likely to happen to the mode of transport, and then look to the market, do some benchmarking. Real-time benchmarking is really important here, not historical benchmarking, because that market just simply doesn't exist anymore. So, and then when you've got those two things together, you can formulate a strategy in as much of an informed way as you possibly can. So I hope that makes sense, Dan.
It does. Thank you so much. Thank you for your insight. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today, and see you soon with more Nina and Pinta Live.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye-bye.
Bye.